what we're talking about today is Autodesk Forma, right? And okay, so an introduction. My name is Sean Solomon. I'm a applications engineer here at Modena. Primarily focus on scan to BIM, which is the kind of the concept of creating digital twins, creating as-built models, so on. And that's really where my focus lies. I've been in the industry or the architectural industry about 5 years before I joined Modena.
Just to tell you guys a little bit about us, we're Autodesk partner, and we're kind of in almost everything to do with the AEC side of things. AEC manufacturing, but here at the Ravonia office, it's mostly just AEC and engineering. We do scan to BIM, we do training, we do Pinnacle. And really our goal is to kind of help you guys deliver better projects, to help you guys through the projects you guys are currently doing and how we can make them better. So it's nice to get to engage with you guys and meet you guys. Okay. Also, and then just a reminder for the guys online, if you can log in with your own Zoom account. SAD requires us to track the time that you're on this on the session, so it makes it easier when you're on your own account. And then there'll also be a Google form towards the end for your details that you'll need to fill in, and that's in order for us to actually submit for the CPD accreditation. For the guys in person, you guys will have a register, so that's fine. What Forma is it's originally was SpaceMaker, and it was acquired around 2020 by Autodesk. And it's really here to kind of make site design a lot faster. It's at the early stage of a project. So before we get into like detailed drawings and so on, you might want to find out what is the feasibility of a project based on its site, based on the amount of buildings you can add to it. And how Forma kind of helps us with this is it allows us to create massing, create geometry that essentially are buildings, roads, trees. Using those, we can actually then run analysis like sound, noise, wind. We can see what the comfortability is of the buildings that we're creating, and the site overall. And the idea is to kind of just streamline this workflow. I mean, in the past, it would take quite a while to do a site analysis just to figure out where is the sun hitting, what is the best way to actually lay out the site. Now, this is meant to make it a lot more easier for us.
The real purpose of it is to kind of introduce this to people that just aren't only in the professional space, but we're looking at people like site developers and so on that can quickly make high-level designs and kind of figure out the feasibility of a site before they send it off for more detailed drawings and more detailed information. From this, they can also run a lot of analysis that wasn't really available to them before without having the full suite of softwares. It also kind of empowers us to collaborate with others. This is like a heavy drive that Autodesk has been pushing with their online kind of platform with BIM and ACC. This is another platform as well where we can collaborate with other consultants, and they don't have to be in the same space as us, which is nice. And it goes back to the whole idea of not needing save files and downloads and so on, because everything's all saved online for us. Okay, so that was just a brief introduction to what Forma is. From here, I'm just going to jump us onto how you'd actually go and get Forma. So Forma is now part of the AEC collection, meaning that if you have an AEC collection, you would have a Forma license by default. All you'd have to do is to go into your Autodesk Manage account, and from there you would go to you'd go down to look for Forma, and all you do is hit access. Once you access this, it'll prompt you to kind of create a hub.
In this case here, we've already created 2 hubs, but you would be prompted to create a hub. You'd pick what server it needs to be on. You'd give it a name. A lot of you guys that are familiar with like BIM and so on, it's a very similar process. So for now, we're just going to go into our Modena hub here. Okay. Okay, so this is our home screen, and if we start ourselves off on the left here, this is where we can cycle between the other hubs that were created if we were invited to other hubs. Below that is where we create our projects. And below that is where we can go through all the projects created, and also where we would go and add new members to this hub that we've created. In the center here is our recent projects. Now, this would obviously populate as time goes on. Below, you have the discovery tour. This is to kind of help you get to grips with Forma and to give you some helpful tips. On the right side here, we have some, useful channels and so on that you can go watch to kind of get some helpful videos and so on. So to start us off, all we'll have to do is just click Create Project. And once we start to actually create our project, here is where we are prompted to pick the country that this project is going to be based in. So I'll keep it local for us, and I would say South Africa. If we did set up some folder structures within our hub, we can then assign this to a certain folder. But for now, it's fine as none. We can always move it later if we need to. We name this project. So for this one, I'm just going to call it Forma for Migrant. And then this last option is, do we need to invite people to the project, or can they just join when they see it on the hub? This is up to you. Maybe if you want to keep a project private, you can keep this off. If you're happy with anybody on the hub just joining it, you can set this to be on. For now, I will just leave it off. And then all we do is hit next. So already quite simple. We don't have to do too much. The next thing is for us to actually pick the location of where our site is going to be. So I was going to do it in Midrand for us. And we can switch over to a nice aerial view of Midrand. So now we have to pick the actual site location. I'm going to use this little empty plot here. At the bottom here, we can see what the area of the site is. So we have quite a bit to play with. I think we can go out as far as, I think, just under 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. That's kind of the max extent of the site we can pick. And zooming in, I think the closest we can get is about 400 or 500 meters by 500 meters. So we won't make our one too big. I think this should be sufficient. If we're happy with this area that we picked, we can just confirm it. So we say confirm area here at the bottom right. And then this is kind of where the exciting part starts to happen. What Forma actually does is it uses something called data fetching to kind of retrieve information about the site, whether it's the topography, existing buildings, the road systems, and so on. And all we have to really do is order this data. Currently, it's free for most of it. And Autodesk has actually said that they're going to partner up with other providers to kind of give us more accurate data. So here where we say order data, we have, I think, about 4 options currently. We have the OpenStreetMaps. This is where Autodesk uses OpenStreetMaps to kind of figure out what the surrounding buildings are and put in some generic masses in there. Okay, hi, so you guys can take a seat anywhere there. Okay, next to it is our 3D terrain. Now, by default, this is always selected or created for us. But if we wanted to switch to a flat terrain, we also have that option as well. It really depends how accurate you find the terrain on a specific site. And the last thing is the roads. So it will actually populate the roads. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick our buildings. Now, unfortunately for us, South Africa doesn't have the best data when it comes to the roads. It doesn't have the best data when it comes to the surrounding buildings. I believe this is just maybe due to OpenStreetMaps not having enough photogrammetry. But Autodesk has promised that they would allow us to use other providers or add on other providers that can give us more data. But for now, I'll order that so we can see what it looks like. And I'm also going to order the street map. Now, the street map works quite nicely. What we're doing here is we're just selecting the extent. We can stretch it out further if we felt like we needed more of the site, but I'm happy with this. So I just go to the top right and I say order. Now we're happy with this. So if we run back to our project, okay, thank you. Yeah. Let me just skip past these steps for us. All right. Okay. So if we actually look at our site currently, as I mentioned, we have the 3D terrain by default. Now, just to explain what we're looking at here, in the center is our model space. This is where we would kind of populate this with our geometry and so on. Just below that, we have some tools, some visualization tools that we can work with. We can change the terrain to be a satellite imagery. We also have some, like, we can make screenshots, we can change the zoom, we can change from 2D to 3D. And then if we look over to our, when we look over to our left side of things, we have some tabs that will speak to the layers. It's where we order our data, the library, where we get extensions, which as we go on, I'll flash these out a bit more for us. On the right here, we have this tab with all our modeling tools on here. And on the right of that, the far right, we have our analytical tools. Basically, this is where we would start to run our analysis once we've started to populate the site. So now this is the site we have with the 3D terrain. You can see it's overlaid the satellite imagery of the site as well, which is quite nice. Now if we look here in our library, we have our 3D terrain. We need to also displace the buildings. So all we do is hit preview, and then we can actually see what buildings or surrounding buildings was it able to find for us. Now, unfortunately, like I said, it's not the best right now for South Africa, just because OpenStreetMap doesn't seem to have good data. So we can see it tried to populate some of these buildings at the bottom, some at the top. But for now, I'm not too happy with this, so I'm not going to add this in right now. I'm going to cancel it out. But if you look at the roads, we'll see a lot better quality. So we see a nice network for the roads. And by having these roads added in, we're able to add in data as in terms of what is the speed limit and what is the traffic, and we can start running noise analysis later on. So for now, I'm going to add this in here. And now going back to our buildings, it is a bit disappointing that we don't have surrounding buildings, but what we can do is we can import our own data in. So if we say import here, we have a few options. We can do some OBJs, we can do some IFCs, we can do some DXF files, even some JPEGs. The only limitation is we're capped at 100 megs. So if you guys have ever worked with IFCs or OBJs, you know they can get quite large. So it's good practice to kind of keep it as small as possible when you try to import this data in. So I prepared a OBJ of the surrounding site. I'm just going to drag and drop that in here. Okay. So while it's busy uploading, for here, I can now start to orientate this info that I brought in. So the first thing I'd probably do is, I know I did it in Revit, so it'll be in millimeters. Okay, there we go, but it's just not the right orientation. So I'm just gonna rotate it. And the other nice thing about actually using Forma is that when you pick a site, it geolocates it for us because it's using street map. So when we send this data into Revit later on, it keeps the origin to 0, but it gives us a datum point, or it gives us a site point that speaks to the geolocation of this site, which is quite nice. It kind of smooths, makes the process a bit faster. So I've brought in this data here, but now I need to actually place it. Now, because it's my own data, I have to actually manually place this. So I'm just gonna select anywhere for now. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into I'm actually gonna select my data first. I'm gonna start by moving it up. So I've selected my data, and if I hit tab, start to get higher up. Now, it's not gonna be perfect to the site, just because, I didn't really know what the heights were so much. And I'm just going to move it to the line. So how I actually doing this was I created this project and I pushed it back into Revit and some sort of massing of the surrounding area, which I think didn't come out too bad. Let me just adjust this a bit. Okay, there we go. So now we have a bit of context for our site and its surroundings. Okay, so now we can go into our proposal. So here's our first proposal. If we hit this plus button, we can start creating and populating more proposals. If we go to the bottom here, we have our layer system. Now, how this layer system works is we have something that's within the, let me just select this here. We have basically a base layer. The base layer determines every proposal. So if we have information set to the base layer, so for instance, this generic mask that I created, if I add it to the base layer, I say move to base layer, every time I make a proposal, it will always keep that massing along with it. This is to ensure I don't have to kind of redo work all the time. So if I'm okay with the site context that I originally started off with, I can keep using it for every proposal versus me having to manually place it every time. Everything out of the base layer will just be specific to that proposal. So as we start to make buildings, we'll start to see that will be populated outside the base layer. But it's a very straightforward system of doing things. So now we have a site. Now we can actually start to look at our tools, our modeling tools. So before we actually start doing our buildings, we would want to maybe set the site limitation. So we have three options here. We have our site limitation, which is essentially marking out the boundary of our site. We have the zones. Now, this is nice for larger developments. And what this really is used for is to highlight areas and run analysis on those specific zones instead of the project as a whole. So I'll leave that out for now. And the last thing is constraint. So constraints are, think of it as your zoning, your height restrictions. It just gives us a visualization of how high can we build. So if I start us off with our site limit here, let me just orientate myself a bit better with this. Actually, let us use our north. That's up. And now we can start to draw. So I'm going to make our site not too complex here. As soon as we start to draw, it's us align our information or align our side. Now doing next. And if I'm happy with that, I can actually start manually typing information. It's highlighted with the 50 meters. If I tab, I can swap between the angles. If you're familiar with AutoCAD, you know the tab function, it works identically the same. I'm happy with this, so I'm just going to hit enter. And now we have our one site. Actually, what I'll do is I'll make us two sites. For this, let's go back. The other option is when we're creating a site, we can do free form, which is what I was currently doing. We can use some shapes, so like a rectangle or a circle, or we can actually trace an existing shape. Now, this is really nice if you maybe imported a DXF, a line drawing from CAD. It can make us easier to kind of like demarcate the site, but it's kind of, it's up to you guys to kind of determine what the balance is. The nice thing about Forma is that it doesn't require you to need site data. You don't need the site just as it's kind of what to have to do our designs on before we actually start to look at other consultants to kind of help us flush the proposal. So I had quite a few questions before in the previous sessions where people asked, you know, can I bring in site data? You can, but the question is, would that not mean the project is already going ahead? Maybe you're lucky and there's some site data from the client or something, but if there isn't, you kind of have to then rely on a surveyor to get you that site data unless you're willing to mark it out yourself. So it's up to you what your approach is. Forma is made very simple and it's made for developers, for people that aren't so much in the modeling space, in the architecture space, or engineering space, so that they can also kind of test out how proposals are going to work and maybe then send it off to someone that's going to actually do the detailed drawings. So to go back to this now, where we have two sites, happy with this. For one of my sites, I'm going to hit a constraint for it. So like before, I'm just going to pick the outline of the site that I made, a height constraint. So I'll just make it 150 meters and we'll enter it there. And now this is just a visual aid. So when we're actually designing, we can see how high is a building. Is it exceeding the height? Right now they don't really have like some type of a notification to say that, you know, your building is going over the site limit. If these are just visual tools to kind of just help you in the design process. Okay, so now we can actually go into the building side of things, actually making geometry. And we have a few options. The first two options for the buildings is the line building and the basic building. Now, the basic building, like before, we have the similar situation as when we were creating our site. We can pick our outline. We can use some of these primitive shapes like a cube or cylinder, or we can just freeform pick it. So I'll just do a quick freeform and I'll make us a nice simple building here with the building. Okay, so once I have the footprint of the building, I can just hit enter and then I can pick the height of the building. So I won't take it too high, then I'll just make it 50 meters. That should be fine. And based on this little building that I made, we already start to get some analytics on this building. Okay, sorry, you guys say you're welcome to fill in these spaces just so you guys can see a bit better. Okay, so okay, so I made this little bit of a U-shaped building here. Now I've already started to get some analytics in terms of the square meterage and so on. We have this building selected. We have it set to 16 floors. So if we wanted to make change the number of floors, we can do that here. We also determine what is the height from floor to I wouldn't say so much floor to ceiling, but floor to floor essentially. So if we say maybe it needs to be 3 meters, it will adjust to make sure each floor is actually 3 meters high. We can also then select the building as a whole and assign it a function. So is this a commercial building? Is it a residential building? If we don't have a function that we want, we can add our own one in as well. So I'll just do a I'll just do a retail one for us and can pick its color and so on. Let's say our entire building isn't residential. We can also then pick specific floors and change their function as well. So if I actually would actually have our lower floors, and that is our as a retail. And this then starts to kind of speak to the unit split, and it starts to do some calculations as to what is the different areas for these different functions as well. So this is quite a nice feature. Another cool thing we can do is we just select our building and we select a specific floor. We have some easily modeling tips or modeling tools we can work with. If we double click into it, we can then change the shape. If I was happy with the shape, for example, but I wanted to change a specific floor, we have quite a few ways we can go about this. Just drag it to start to change what is the actual floor plate for this floor here. And it actually gets quite deep. There's quite a few tools we can actually use. If we right click in and edit it, we can take it further. We can even convert it to a 3D sketch where we can start to make some more interesting shapes. But really, if we were just going to do a quick basic building, all we have to do is just select our floor and we can actually start dragging it, which is quite nice. Now, I pushed that a bit too far out. Select it again. There we go. Now, we also have this option of we can even take it a step further and start to split up each floor that we created. So if we go on the building we selected and we go down here, we have floor plans. If we select the one floor plan, we can actually start to see what each level looks like. And from this, we can even start to create some type of typology or we'll split up how the floor plan actually works. So if I select it and drag it, you can see in the 3D space, it also moves there as well. If we actually edit the sketch here as well, it's another way for us to start to actually edit the shape of this floor plan. So I'm going to start to add in a rectangle. Maybe we'll put it here. And we can assign it a function as well, where we have our different functions here. We have the unit, the core. Is it a corridor? So for example, here, I'll make this a core. And if I say shift and select the floors below, it starts to copy that information across, which is quite nice. If we go to the bottom here, our measurement tools, we can also then set some rules in place, like do we want to see the area on the floor plan? What exactly are we looking at here? So if I assign this a unit, we can also start to look at the area numbers and so on, just so that it gives us a better visualization of how much of space we're actually using. So if we're happy with this, we can go back. And as you can see here, it started to change our floor plans. Another cool thing is we can also add in parking. And what Forma will do for us is it will take that floor plan or that layout and try to populate with parking as best as possible. So I'll select the bottom 2 floors and I just hit this plus by parking. And now it starts to create parking bays for us here. If we go back into our floor plan and we go down all the way to our first and second floor, okay, my bad on that one there. Okay, we can actually start to see how the parking has been laid out. We'll also start to get a nice count for the parking. We'll get what is the area of the parking, how many parking bays have we created, and we can even take it a bit further if we wanted to then customize that parking. Let's say we had different dimensions for the parking bays, we wanted to change the angles, we can actually play around with those settings as well and start to change how our parking looks. So very, very nice tool. Autodesk has also said that this is kind of the early stage of Forma. So as time goes on, they're going to start to add in more features, more tools that we can play around with. If some of you guys actually remember SpaceMaker, it had, I think they said it had 100+ tools of different analytical tools. So Autodesk is trying to slowly build this up and to kind of start it off to kind of learn the fundamentals of Forma. And as time goes on, they will start to add in more features in. But like, for example, the parking bay one is a very nice feature, very interesting. It already makes it so much easier to actually figure out how many bays can you actually use or how many bays can you get away with on the site. Because in most projects, the parking actually makes or breaks if the project is feasible or not. So that was our basic building. I just have this constraint here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide this constraint just because it's just obstructing my view of it. The next one is our line building. Now, line building is a lot more rudimentary than the basic building. Like it says, it's basically you drawing a line and creating a building from it. If we select our line building and we scroll down here, before we even start to draw, we have some options. We can say what the width of the building is, the amount of floors. We can even say what its alignment is. So right now it's down the center. So if we actually have to draw here, we're drawing from center to center. But sometimes it's a lot easier to just put alignment towards maybe the left side and actually select the edge of the site. So it starts to draw it for us. If we go back and select our line building, actually, I'll just manually draw it just so it looks a bit better. Let's just freeform pick it. Let's start to draw our building. Now we can move this line in whatever direction and angle we kind of want to, which is quite nice. So I'm just going to go with this type of shape and I'm going to hit enter here. Now this one here, because of the side, I started higher up. It's not aligned over the side, which isn't a big deal just because for right now, what Forma is kind of trying to do is trying to give you an idea of how the layout of the site is going to be. When we start to take into Revit, we can then adjust it to fix the height so it's flush with the site. Maybe it's a cut and full situation on this type of project. But for now, I'm not too concerned about this. If I select my line building, I can then adjust it like my basic building. I can change its width. I can add the amount of floors that I wanted. What is the floor to floor height? So we put it up to 5 meters. And like before, we can actually assign it a function. Now we also get the circulation option. This will basically let us pick where's the bulk of the circulation. Is it a central corridor system or is it on the edge? We can pick its width. So quite a few options there. Before I actually do that, if we go down as well, we can also start to make typologies for these different units. So if I go back up here, we have these sections. If we have it set to 16 meters, what Forma is doing is it's splitting it up evenly 16 meters for every kind of segment. So if we reduce it to 10, we start to see more of these. If we go to our floor plan now, what we can do is we can add a floor plan. Think of it as a typology, and it will populate to every one of these units. So we split this up here, and we say maybe it's a corridor down the center. So we select this here, and I'm just going to say this is a core. I'm going to say this is a unit. Okay, this is a corridor, and okay, I'll leave it as a unit. Okay, so I've changed my area, so now we can actually see the areas of these spaces. I'm happy with this, so I'll go back out, and now it kind of populates this for the topology that fit that size. and we can keep adding in. So we can keep making typologies for these different spaces. So you can already imagine how useful this is. If you think about a walk-up, a 4-story walk-up, maybe the insides are 1 bedrooms with the center units are 2 bedrooms. Now you can actually easily adjust all of them in one go instead of manually doing each unit at a time. So quite nice there. And let's say when we do the line building, we're kind of limited with the type of functions we can kind of use because it's not like the basic building. For instance, we can't really pick an individual floor. We must pick the building as a whole. But we have a nice option here where we can actually break the line building apart. Up here, we can release it and it becomes a basic building. So once we release it, it works exactly the same as a basic building where each little unit becomes its own thing and adjust each unit as we see fit. Now, in this case, a lot of these line buildings, so it becomes a bit tedious to like have to manually adjust each one of these. But this is kind of where you can start to make these interesting designs. And we can go to each floor plan on each floor and adjust them as well. So quite a nice function here. We're not kind of stuck with if we created a line building, we can't really get that functionality from it. We kind of get some nice options there. So since we're kind of making good progress here on these buildings, is there any questions from you guys or any questions for what we've been doing so far? You guys all right here in person? You guys okay? Online, I haven't seen any questions, so that's fine. Okay, so the next one is to actually create a 3D sketch. So like I mentioned before, a 3D sketch is where you kind of start to do more of these interesting shapes. And this is still in the same language of creating buildings and structures that you would actually use in your Revit model and so on. So all I do is create 3D sketch. And from there, we will get prompted with this new menu. Now, this new menu, it has some more detailed options. So for example, we have the sketch options where beyond just the line and rectangle, we can start to make arcs and splines. We have some primitive shapes to help us on our way if we wanted to maybe start off with a cube or pyramid. And lastly, we have some advanced modeling tools. These are stuff like combining two objects together, creating some fillets, some lofts, and so on to kind of stretch out the shapes. So to start me off, I'm just going to use the cube. And this is just a primitive shape, just a primitive cube. And then from there, I have to select its face. And I need to start to stretch it out. So I have a few options. I can tilt the face, but I can also just extrude the face out. So by clicking extrude, I can pick a point and start to stretch it. And if any of you guys have ever used Format, this modeling is quite similar to Format, how that worked. They kind of built this over that platform in the sense of the modeling works very, very similar. So I can snap to different areas to kind of get the height to be the same as another building. For instance, if I pick a line here, I can then decide if I want to push just that specific line. That one didn't work so good. Let me actually just cut out a shape from this. So I pick a line here, and I pick one edge, and I pick another, I hit enter, and I select this out. We can extrude this face out to start to create some different shapes. Now, I'm not the best, I'll be honest, creating these type of interesting designs. It'll take me quite a while. I was always that type of person where I start to do the rivet drawing before the sketch and just do the sketch afterwards. Like I did it from the start. So for me, yeah, it'll take me quite a while to make a nice design for you guys. But for example, here we created this kind of a angle of this building here. If we're happy with this, we can just close it out, and this becomes a generic block for us. We can also convert this over similar to the line building. Okay, let's just wait for it to populate and add floors to it as well. But again, because it's a more organic or maybe a more unique shape, it will kind of like limit how we're going to do it. Sorry, let me just go back in. Okay, here it is here. So if I just select this and I say group, There we go. If I select this building and I say add floors, see, it's because the space is not really the best. I didn't do such a good job of creating it. It's limiting me to make the floors, but how it usually works is when you're done with the shape, we can just hit floors and it will start to populate it as it did for the other. Let me close this out. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, so maybe I did it too small or I didn't close the space correctly, but you would be able to make a generic object and then actually add floors to it. But then again, or to kind of elaborate on it, you're limited to how you make it. So like if you do it like how I did it and didn't do the best job, you're going to get this error where it's not going to let you populate the floors. But that's just another way of adding a building. So you have about 3 ways. So you can do your basic, you can do a line building, or you can do a 3D shape or 3D sketch. And the final way is actually creating in Rivet and pushing it back into Forma, which we'll touch on in a bit. Okay, so no questions from there. Okay, so the next thing we'll quickly look at is adding some vegetation. So we have 2 options here. We can say, we can add trees by area. So similar to how we were creating our base building, we'll select the area that we want to in. So I'll just keep my okay, with enter, and it starts to populate it with some nice trees. Now, these trees will help us out in our when we actually run some of the other studies on the site. For instance, like wind resistance and so on. Adding these trees will help pin that down. Now we can also adjust this, so we can change the spacing and we can change the size of these trees, which is quite nice. We can also just do a line, a tree line. So like for instance, the edge of the site and add a bunch of trees. And we can say what is the spacing. So we wanted to make it a bit further apart and we wanted them to be 10 meters, for instance. So the trees are quite nice. Again, they will help you with stuff like comfortability. Sometimes with the sun study, depending how close it is to the building. A lot of these tools up here, like the noise and so on, it should help reduce those. The other option we have here is our roads and railways. Now, when we start off, we actually added in our own roads. Or we actually did the data fetching to give us roads, to provide us roads for us. So if I go back here and I select these roads, we hide the terrain, we can see the network of the roads. We can also just add them in ourselves if we wanted to as well. So we would just go on to roads and we'll select it, and let's use this freeway, for instance. We'll select a point and draw it in. So let's pick for me. Let's do it here. And we'll pick a point here. Now, just add a road. It's limited to just roads for vehicles. Start to make walkways. And also help determine what is the noise of that site. So if we picked our roads here, we can say traffic noise data, and we can add that to it. So we would need to add things like the speed limits. Actually, that's probably not the best speed limit for there. We can say when is the time of day, when is it most traveled, and so on. We can give it what is the traffic. So if it's a heavy traffic and whatnot. For pedestrians, you wouldn't really have these type of things, but if we do our normal road here, for instance, we would then look at like the freeway would be probably quite busy during the morning and during the afternoon, and we would start to populate it that way. Now, by adding these type of information in, when we actually start to run the analysis, we'll start to see it. So the next thing would be the analysis of it. So here's our 3D sketch here. We also have these generic volumes as well. These are basically just generic shapes that the idea would be that you would later on try to convert them into buildings and masses and so on. So our first one is our area metrics. We have looked at this one here. We have our unit split or the function split and so on. We can see things like the parking. Right now, we're very limited as to what parameters we can create or what metrics we can create. It would be nice as time goes on if we could do stuff like coverage for the site versus the building. maybe the floor area ratio, things like that. But for now, we just have to work with what we have. We could do our sun study. So here we can pick the days. It picked for us the January and June, which I assume is where the sun is the highest and the lowest. So we'll run this analysis. Now up here is where the zones come to play. By creating different restrictions or different zones, we can pick what needs to actually show this analysis. I'm going to pick both of these. I'm just going to run the analysis. And all this does is it'll start to do the AI-powered insight in the background for me. I'm also going to do a daylight potential, run that analysis as well. We have our wind. So now we can see the comfortability space is going to be. This is quite nice for places to research a building. You can see what the conditions of the site is. So, for example, the light green areas is where there's good seating, where the red and the light orange or the yellow and the orange talk to like how uncomfortable it is. So, for instance, here it's strolling conditions. We don't really have anywhere that's uncomfortable just because the site is quite large and the building's kind of close off these spaces quite well. We can also then do some microclimate. I'm not going to run the microclimate. We have our energy. The nice one is the noise. So we'll run a quick noise analysis. So we can see where we're going to get the bulk of the noise. I think I just populated this one road, so that's why we're not getting too much of noise, which is good, I guess. But if you took the time to actually put in that data for the roads and so on, you'd get a nice result, especially with an area like this where it's a mix between residential and commercial. I've noticed in the European sites and so on, it actually adds the data for these roads on its own. Unfortunately for us, it doesn't do it for us. I'm not sure why. I guess it's just, again, it goes back to OpenStreetMaps. But if we were happy with these analysis or we wanted to check them out, we can go back to our sun study and we can view the history of this analysis and we can see what Forma has done for us. What is it really? Yeah, that one's taking long to load. We also have the compare feature at the bottom where we can compare two proposals or two analysis against each other. I just want to open it through here though. Not too sure why it's not letting me. View history. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Daylight potential. Okay, so now we can see the analysis that we were running on the site. Again, if you're having a hard time, you can also just pick at the bottom. So the daylight potential here, we can use this inspect option at the top here and can pick a specific point. So here at our lower parking bays, we can see we only get a 26% potential. So not the best. You wouldn't want to live in a parking area anyways. If we lower it, we can see where we're getting the least amount of daylight. You can see in these corner of these buildings and so on. It's not the best. Let me swap over to our compare tool so we can look at our other analysis like the sun study and so on. Yeah. Okay, so here we are for our compare tool. Now we can see what analysis we've kind of ordered or we run, and we can also see the proposals. So I'll do the daylight potential. Actually, not the daylight potential. I'll do the sun. I'll just do the sun hours for us. This proposal here. There we go. Help us determine if we were going to put solar or something like that, what is the energy efficiency of the site? So we can see the top of the building is getting a good 9 hours plus in January. So if I just inspect it, I'm getting 13 hours. If we reduce the scale here to see, we can see the corner again, they're getting a very limited amount of hours, almost 0 hours, which is bad. You might want to adjust your design to kind of fix this. We can also then compare. Sorry, let me close this out for us. Do Sun 1. I can compare the two for our winter and our summer days. So for January, let me go back to our site. I'm not too sure why our winter one isn't popping up. Okay, let's go back here. And if we go over down, we see our history. Here it is. Okay. So now we can swap between the January and the June. And we can see what is it. All the slopes. Okay, perfect. So we can see for June, for example, there's a lot less sun going on. We can see there's areas where they're getting no sunlight. So for example, this building, you'd want to change the orientation of the building to get sun maybe more throughout the day. So quite a nice feature. It can get quite complex with the larger sites as well. Now, the next thing would be, let's say we were happy with our site proposal. The next step for this would be to take it into Revit, for example. So that's quite easy to do. We would just pick the proposal we want. So up here on the right, we hit these three little dots, and we have a few options like renaming it or duplicating it. We can go to Revit and we can say send to Revit. Now, if you wanted to do the add-in for Revit, if I open up my Revit here and I go into my massing tab, under the massing tab here, we have this new Forma add-in. You would have to download this from this Forma hub. Basically, you'd go here and you download the add-in and install it. It's quite small, it's maybe 30 megs. And once you install it, you can then send your designs to Revit. So all we do is click send to Revit, and it will start to send the proposal to Revit. We go back to Revit and we hit this drop down and we can say load proposal. Now we have the load options. This is kind of to tell us what do we want to bring in. Do we want to bring in our 3D sketches? Do we want only the building geometry and so on? The settings that I have now I'm fine with. I'm just going to say load proposal. And the very, very nice thing about this is that it takes those buildings and it starts to convert them into Revit items. So you get walls, you get floors, you get a roof, and that's really nice. And once you actually do some markups in here, you can actually send this proposal back to Forma. So you can actually do some modeling on the Revit side and send it back to Forma. So for now, I'm happy with proposal 1. I'm going to load this one in. Okay, so while this is loading, any questions from you guys? Anything you guys want to ask? You guys all right? I don't know if I'm doing a good job or an okay job. It could be either or. Okay, guys online, I don't really see many questions. If you guys have any questions, yeah, please just put it into the chat. I see 2 people have raised their hands. Unfortunately, if you don't mind just typing in what your question is, I'm actually not seeing it yet. Yes.
So this Forma it's limited to some
Yeah, so
something else.
Yeah, so the question is what is the extent that you can pick a site? And right now it's limited to that 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. So which is a 4-kilometer area basically. So you can't go much further than that, it is quite large. But maybe in future they can extend it past that as well further. But yeah, for now you're just limited to that in terms of how large you can go. Yeah. Okay, so this is still loading. It usually goes faster. I think it also just depends on your internet speed for this proposal to get pulled down. Okay, so while this is loading, we'll come back to this one here. We'll go back to Forma quick. Now, another feature we have is these extensions. What these extensions are is Autodesk has opened this up to other developers where they can kind of download, they can develop their own like add-ins or extensions for Forma. This is so like you can basically have other developers make some cool features that are native to Autodesk, like the ones we can see here. The first one is the Rivet add-in. We also have a Rhino add-in, which is interesting. They have the shape driver, which I'll get that one there, and the test fit for the parking. And kind of the purpose of this is for people to kind of add in at every stage, from the design to the exporting and so on, even creating parking and so on. So you're not limited to just what Autodesk is creating. There'll be other developers that will also try to build on top of this platform. It's going to close this one out. Let's see if our Rivet project. Okay, so busy thinking there. So I pulled in the shape driver and the test fit. Now, when we go here to our extensions at the bottom, on the right side at the bottom, we have some new options here. We can make a nice stack tower. We can do a twisted tower. That's actually why I picked the Midrand site, because the PwC building is nearby. So if we were to make a nice twisted tower, it's quite easy for us to do. So we'll just actually draw the shape of the tower. To make it quite interesting, we'll enter. Okay, and I picked the shape, and our test for is sorry, not test first. Shape driver is now trying to generate how this twisted tower would look. So it generated for me, and I can then further kind of edit it. So I can change the rotation. I can also change the height. I can do the floor count. So quite a few nice stuff. It's all getting automated in the background. Similar thing for the stacked building as well. If you wanted to make like a stepped building, you can actually just do it a lot faster than if you have to manually start to kind of edit these tools. Oh, I'm sorry, edit this building. The other tool that we had here is our test fit parking, which is quite a fun one as well. So we actually pick the space that we want. Let's just do this triangle or this rectangle type of shape here, and we enter it here. It starts to generate some parking with some nice islands and some curves and so on. And like the shape driver, we can start to change a lot of these parameters to get us a better result. So kind of similar to the one that we have native to Forma. Just the difference is that we can just make this parking area, and they both can be made anywhere, but this gives you a little bit more functionality as to how you can customize it in terms of what is its widths and lengths and so on. Okay, let's see. Fingers crossed our proposal is almost done for Rivet. So the idea here would be you'd pull your drawing from Forma, you'll pull it from Forma, and then you'd have your generic buildings converted into actual walls and floors and so on, where you can then actually kind of either start editing them or adding in some additional buildings that maybe you had from previous proposals and send them back in. Now, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not too sure why it's taking this long for this proposal. Maybe I made it too heavy, but it's not too bad. Not too bad in terms of sizing. Okay, we'll come back to that one day. But yeah, that's basically it. That's the tools that Forma has. Right now, they're not too many, but they're quite easy to use. Just playing around with it for maybe an hour or two, you start to pick it up quite fast. It's like I said, it's made quite simple. It's design made very simple. It's made in mind with a broad range of professionals and clients that they can start to use this and kind of start to actually customize their sites even before they even send it out to an engineer or architect or surveyor to do any work. And let me just see. The last thing was just the Rivet thing that I wanted to show you guys. While we're waiting for the guys online, I'm going to send you guys the Google form. If you guys can use that link to fill it out so we can submit for the CPD. If you're not doing CPDs, can you also just fill it out for the attendance? That way we can send you some additional resources and so on after the presentation. It's going to add the link to the chat. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so if you guys can just fill this out, we can then send you a closeout email with some additional resources as well as the presentation as well, and some tips on how you can get started with Forma. Okay, and I don't see any questions from the guys online. In person, you guys have any questions? Fine for now. Everything's okay. Okay. Yeah, the Rivet one is just a bit of a letdown. Let me see if I can just try jumpstart it. Yes, sir.
In Forma, can you bring, like, this is your both message with on one line, one level, you just levels in Forma because you have the levels.
So with Forma, the way you'd have to actually adjust the levels is by moving it. So it's not the most accurate way of doing it. So for example, if I select this here, where's my, okay, if I select my building here, I have this option here. Now, is this height, I'm not constrained in terms of what it's not going to be set to like levels that you create in Rivet. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So how it would kind of work, or the workflow would be that you start to develop in Forma, you take it into a Rivet and you start to adjust it in Rivet. And if you want to then go back to Forma, you just push the proposal back to Forma. It would then convert any new information that you added into some generic shapes that you can work on again. So don't rely too much on Forma for the actual levels, survey levels, even the topography. It's a nice addition that they have it, but it's not always the most accurate topography. So it's just to kind of get you going to start it off. As the project actually goes further, you'd get more accurate data, and then you'd want to maybe look at importing it in, or even by then you might not need to come back to Forma anymore. I hope that answered your question, sir. Okay.
So sorry, just
yes.
The context of the new
yes. Yeah, you can. So these that I brought in actually become 3D sketches. So you can actually edit them as a 3D sketch. How I did this was I just okay, I think it did. Okay, it's still busy. Apologies for that. So what happens is that when you export it out from Rivet into Forma, you get a topo solid with this image of the site overlaid onto it. And that's really nice. So what I did was I just created a massing of the shapes, the outlines, and I just pushed those massings back into Forma. Once I've been into Forma from here, I can just go into the 3D sketch and start to edit those. And I can even break them into their own buildings if I needed to as well. So it's quite fluid in how you use it. It's really up to you what works best. Okay.
So
yes, ma'am.
Is it, say I've got like a side project and all I want to do the sun, fire, and wind and everything for that project. So is it okay to start with this first? We do all the sun, is it the sun with sun, wind, fire?
Yes. So
that is it the data analysis? I start with the Forma and then I.
So okay, it's a good question. So it kind of speaks to what was Forma created for, how does it work? Before in the past, to do a site analysis, you use a lot of 2D images. You would take a 2D image and you'd see what the sun direction was and so on. So in a case like this, you would start off in Forma because you can then demarcate what is the site extent, and then you can see already what are the conditions of the sun. What direction is the sun moving in? On the site specifically, what are the views and so on. So you definitely want to start off in Forma, and it's made to be a lot easier for you to run the site analysis versus before where you do a desktop study to kind of get the site analysis. Think of like the wind. I know you just have to go find a reliable source for the wind direction. Now Forma is doing it for you. So it's kind of consolidating all those desktop studies that we would have done individually and bringing them all into one space that we can use. Yes, Lee, sorry. Okay. So just going back to the gentleman's question. So now you can actually edit each one of these individually as well. And you can even convert them into buildings if you wanted to. So it's up to you. It's very nice to like bring in, you almost, we say generic shapes, but they're actually quite flexible. and they give you a good functionality. Okay, here we go. Finally, so our Forma presentation came through here. We just close this out. And now we can actually see what was all the stuff that we were designing. Now, don't judge me too much on this. I was just going and doing everything here. So it's going to be very messy, but you can kind of see, or you'll get to get a good idea of what is the quality of information you're getting from Forma when you push it back into Revit. So if I just change my style to realistic, we'll see that TopoSolid, we'll see the material that it created has the overlay of the satellite imagery nicely draped over it, which is already a very nice start. I just want to change this to maybe coarse for us, just to reduce this a bit. We can also see these contours of the TopoSolid, but like I said, it's not the most reliable. It's all based on OpenStreetMaps. We can see these generic blocks that were created. Now, okay, there we go, perfect. So to start us off, if we pick our TopoSolid and we say edit, there it is here, and we go into the structure, we can look at its material for the finish. We'll see it created this material with this image overlaid on it, which is very nice. If we actually start to look at the buildings we created, so if I go back to this building here, if I select the side here, you can see this is a wall that it created for us. If I pick the top, I think it would be a basic roof. So let me delete this. Okay, my line. Sorry, let me just hide this topography. Maybe the topography is a bit heavy. That's why it was taking so long. But we can also see created levels for us. The other thing I wanted to show you guys is that when you actually mark out the typologies, it makes internal walls as well, which is very nice. So it kind of gives you a very nice rudimentary design of the building. So if you were somebody that wanted to spend a lot of extra time, I'm going to hide this massing, extra time actually developing it in Forma, you get a very good result when you take it to Revit. You don't have to worry about you doing the work twice. But for the guys that just want high-level drawings, it works just as well. I'm just hiding this. I think it was just a bit heavy. I do have a lot of geometry. We can see it brought in our trees, our little trees as some generic blocks. I'm just hiding these as I go. Okay. Okay, so we can see the levels it created. Unfortunately, okay, there we go. I'm just gonna delete this. There we go. So here we can see that line building that we created. We can see how it actually split up this line building for us. I'm just gonna hide this. We can see it created these internal walls to divide the different units and so on. So quite nice. Now, the next step would be if we were to maybe add in some buildings from another proposal that we want to reuse here, or we want to start to model something in Revit, we can do that and push it back into Forma and see that reflect. So here's these internal walls that it added in for us as well. Let's say I was just going to quickly add a building in. So I'll just do a quick wall. I'll keep it very simple just because I can see it's getting quite heavy. I'll just make this wall here. I'm just going to select this so we can see it, and I'll make it, I'll try to make it a bit bigger. I suppose that would be fine. So let's say we added something into this presentation. If we, so the zoom tab is blocking me. If we go to our massing and site and we go back to proposal, the Forma add-in, we can update the proposal. So all we do is hit update proposal, and it's going to send it back to Forma. Now I'm hoping this is a lot quicker than when you try to bring it in. So it's going to select and tell us what it's updating. So we'll just update that. Okay, that's fine. So the reason why I said that is because I also did delete some stuff from the actual Forma model itself. If I didn't delete anything from the Forma model and just added things in, it wouldn't really matter. But it's quite nice that we can actually kind of customize these that we created here in Revit as well.
So this is taking a bit long. Just see if I can. Okay. It's taking a bit long, but what I'll quickly do is I'll switch us over to another proposal that I did do this in, so you can kind of see it. But yeah, it's a very like the interoperability between it is very well made. They did a really good job pushing the two. So let me see if I have it here. I think it was this one here. Okay, it actually updated it quite fast. So there was no need for me to switch proposals. Yeah. So I'll go back to my mid-range proposal, and we'll say populate. But you don't need to leave the proposal to see it. You can just refresh, or if you give it a couple seconds, it will try and load it in. So if I look around here, here's this little wall that I added in. And now as part of this, and I can edit this wall again, make it a 3D sketch and so on, and take it from there. So very nice interoperability between the two. And that is what I'd say the workflow is. You would start off in Forma, do a lot of your high-level designs, and then push it into Revit, where you'd kind of flash it out and take it for more detailed levels. But yeah, any questions from you guys? Listen, yes, sir, you have a question?
Can I edit topography from Revit?
You can edit the topography in Revit, but remember, it will just give you this extent here that we're working with here. You won't really see the change too much in Forma. If you change the actual contours, you'll see it reflect. So I don't actually want to try it in Revit because I know as soon as I try unhide these stuff, it's gonna start to think. But if you change the size of the topography, it doesn't really change because Forma doesn't see the topography as a topo solid like Revit does. But if you change the contour height, it does adjust it in Forma. So you can. So later on, if you do get surveyor's information and you get an accurate topography, you can push it back into Forma and relook at the designs. But with Forma, you can see that the buildings aren't constrained well to the topography. They're not made to kind of run flush with the topography. So like if in a case like this is eating into the building. So you'd have to either do cut and fill or raise the building up. That is something that you have to look at in Revit for the elevations and whatnot. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Can you export high quality graphics from Forma directly?
Can you export?
Graphics.
Oh yes, okay. That's a very good question. So down here at the bottom, if you hit this little camera, we can start to save what we're looking as 4K captures. So we can save the camera position and we can save this as a 4K image, and it works with basically anything that we open up in Forma. So we can do it with our analysis as well. So if you compare two analysis against each another, we can also capture that the image of that as well. So for presentations and so on, it's quite nice. You can just get these images and just take them directly into your presentation. I'll open this one here up for us. There we go. So this is what I captured from Forma. Same thing with the analysis and so on. Made very easy for us to just download these graphics. Okay. Any other questions? I didn't notice that there are some nice online questions. So to going back, what is the capability of your machine to be able to run both softwares? So like I said, Forma is all online. So you don't need, it's all cloud-based. So you don't actually need a high-end machine or anything like that. Revit on the other end, you'd want the specs that Autodesk recommends for you to run Revit. But from the Forma side, it's any machine will do. As long as you can connect to the internet and you have access to Forma, you're good to go. Okay. Okay, the next question. Do you think it's a good tool to have if you are a develop manager, who manages projects at high level? For a development manager, I think it is a very good tool to have just because you can start to run your proposals. It's very simple to use, and you can already kind of start to determine the feasibility of the site before you look at site acquisition or something like that. So definitely a very good tool for developers. Okay, that's answered. Okay, yes. To answer the next question, with initial setup of buildings, when you set out parking, for example, do you add a margin for structure to individual bay sizes? Or is there a way to indicate it? If I'm understanding this question correctly, for the set out, yes, you'd use the snap tools to basically determine how far away from the building you'd want the parking to start. And then you'd use that tool to then further kind of put in the dimensions of the parking. Once you've actually created the overall parking, you then use Forma to kind of auto-generate the bays and so on. But the nice thing is you can use the actual basic building tool, draw a floor plan, and then convert that into a parking. So you just use the building that you create as the base, and you move it off maybe by 10 meters by 10 meters away from the building, and from there create the parking. Okay. Okay. What is the difference between AI and the normal Autodesk apps? Does this one, why does this one called an AI? Okay, so why they are saying Forma has AI, it's called, they call it AI empowered insight, which means that at the back end of things, it's supposed to be using AI to kind of calculate the things like the unit splits and some of the analysis and so on like that. Now it's a hard thing to kind of split because it's hard to say if it's AI. In some cases, it's actually just using formulas to like determine unit splits. But right now, Autodesk says it's AI powered insight, which my thinking behind it is more the analysis side of things. Maybe how it's kind of processing that data, how it's actually retrieving that data based on the site and so on. That's where I think the bulk of the AI is being kind of processed. Where like things like Rivet and so on, it requires you to actually add in the locations of the site to start to do sound studies and so on. Here, you're just actually using a street map to pick that. Okay, do you think this is a good tool if you okay, I did answer this one. Yeah, definitely it's a good tool for a developer. If you're a developer manager and so on, it'll be very useful for you, especially early stages of the project. Yeah, so to answer the question, what properties does the model take when it goes into Rivet? It assigns it walls, floors, roofs, depends whatever you've modeled in, and it will convert it back to the generic buildings when you push it back into Forma. So you're not just getting generic masses when you pull it into Rivet. So it can't work with Rivet Lite. So the question was, can Forma work with Rivet Lite? Unfortunately not. It can't, because Rivet Lite doesn't allow for any add-ins or anything like that. You must, it must be the full version of Rivet, unfortunately. Okay, done. Please, okay, Chris, I will add the link to the attendance register again in the chat. Actually, let me just send it to you here. Yeah. Yeah, apologies for getting to those questions a bit late. I was looking at the webinar chat and not the questions and answers. But yeah, if there is any other questions, please just shout and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, just to go back to the guys, let's see what has been said here. Can you assign properties when bringing to Rivet so that, for example, exterior walls are auto-created a certain wall type that you can have loaded in Rivet? Unfortunately, you can't do that. You can't assign it through Forma. It must be sent. The way it's sent into Rivet, it kind of gives you those generic exterior walls that has been created. You can't actually assign a specific type that you want. But because it's all the same wall type, you can just maybe modify that wall. I would suggest that so that you can edit it you can edit all the walls at once. But yeah, right now, unfortunately, you can't really customize what the information comes out in when you push it into Rivet, especially like the floors and the roof and so on. It's just a generic version of it, but at least it's the actual roof and the actual family, the system family for walls and floors. Okay, Chris, you said the chat is disabled. I did reply to you with a link. Just let me know if you are still struggling, Chris, and then I can maybe find another solution to send to you. I think you did receive it. Okay. Should Forma not become part of Rivet? In a way, of how Forma was created, it's supposed to be a platform on its own, and it's working as the. So you have the AEC, which is architecture, engineering, and construction, and Autodesk is adding O, which is operations. And Forma is supposed to be the kind of like the starting point of that extra operations that they want to add in. Yeah. So it works well with Rivet. But I think they have plans for Forma to be its own platform and start to work more in the cloud and start to kind of link the other options like BIM 360 and ACC and so on and be another platform. So yeah, I think Rivet will still be its own thing, while Forma will be a cloud-based solution, which will start to kind of have a bigger purpose as time goes on. Okay.